Robert Baratheon was never a patient man, not in war, not in feast, and certainly not with matters of the heart. He walked the great hall of the Red Keep with a thunderous gait that echoed across the flagstones. His broad shoulders stiffened beneath the weight of a crown he had once worn proudly, but now found more confining than any set of chains. This day, he would not be content with half measures or the quiet urgings of courtiers. The walls seemed too narrow around him, the canopy of distant rafters too low, as though the entire castle braced itself for the storm that was King Robert's wrath. He turned his dark, full beard to Ned Stark, who stood beside him. Ned was grim-faced and silent, a distant cold in his gray eyes, yet loyal to the last. Robert studied his friend as he had done 100 times, perhaps 1,000. They had faced countless battles together, so many that their bond was forged in blood and hardened by the fires of rebellion. That the realm now threatened to erupt once more weighed heavily on them both. But Robert's anger was a living thing. He could not quell it any longer. "The Lannisters," he growled. "I have coddled them for too long, Ned." He slammed a thick hand upon the nearest table, rattling a pewter goblet half filled with wine. He almost did not notice the wine. That was a sign of his mood indeed, for Robert Baratheon was a man rarely parted from his drink. "Even you had your suspicions. Jon Arryn died under questionable circumstances. Then the damned boy, Bran. You told me about the fall, and your sense of it. I trusted you, Ned, but I did not act swiftly enough." "Men are swan." Ned nodded, the lines of care on his face deepened by months of uneasy King's Landing politics. He had wanted to be in the north, safe and distant from the intrigues that festered in the capital. But for the sake of an old friendship and the memory of Jon Arryn, he had come. And he had tried to keep the peace for Robert's sake, but the truth was too compelling, too ominous. "They have something to hide," Ned said quietly. "And your instincts are not wrong. We both know Cersei Lannister is cunning. If you mean to move against them." "Mean to move against them?" Robert roared, though his voice was subdued enough not to carry too far beyond the echoing vault of the Great Hall. "I mean to crush them, Ned. Day one. I've had enough. I'm done dancing in the shadows while they spin their little webs. Someone killed Jon, I'll swear it, and I will have revenge for that. Now, with or without your help. Now, with or without your help." "You know I will never abandon you," Ned said, though his voice was as grim as winter. "But you must call on Stannis. He is your brother, and if you believe the Lannisters guilty of treason, then Stannis must hear it from you. And if we are to fight, we will need the strength of Storm's End." At that, Robert's expression wavered. He and Stannis had never been close. Renly at least had the charm to warm a room, but Stannis was flint and iron, forging a brittle alliance with his older brother at the best of times. Yet Robert knew the truth. Stannis was the only man he could trust to carry out his will without hidden agendas. He was stern, as righteous as a rock, and unwavering in matters of law and duty. Robert might resent his brother's aloofness, might find him too humorless, but as an ally, Stannis would be the staunchest bulwark imaginable. "A raven has already been sent," Robert growled. "If he chooses to come, well, I won't beg him, but I expect him to come. Honor demands no less." Ned said nothing for a moment. A hush descended on the great hall. Outside, muffled by walls of stone and tapestry, the sounds of King's Landing rumbled on. The clamor of trade, the calls of street vendors. But in that cavernous chamber where they stood, the future of the Seven Kingdoms hung in a tenuous balance. "The moment is upon us," Ned finally said, his hand resting lightly on the pommel of his sword. "We must tread carefully, my friend." Robert snorted, as though caution were an afterthought. "Carefully?" His voice rumbled with challenge. "There is no time for caution. We have overlooked too much. But if the Lannisters believe they can twist me further, or if they suspect we know too much of their secrets, they will strike first. We must not let them have that chance." "My!" The king turned, his blue eyes sharp as steel. His gaze swept the hall until it found Sir Barristan Selmy, white cloak trailing behind him. Sir Barristan stood at attention, the living embodiment of chivalry. Though a sadness had crept into his eyes these last years, under a king who drank and caroused more than he ruled. But he recognized the gravity of this moment. Robert beckoned him closer. "My lord?" Sir Baratheon asked quietly. "Assemble the king's guard at once," Robert commanded. "No more subtlety. Let them be posted throughout the Red Keep. I want watchers at every corner. No one enters or leaves without my word. And find me that slippery Lannister whelp, the Kingslayer. I won't have him lurking in shadows with a sword at my back." "Then," Sir Baratheon bowed, though a flicker of apprehension crossed his face. Yet he departed, his cloak brushing the cold floor. Ned observed the king's face again, glimpsing the old friend he knew from the rebellion, the warrior who had fought valiantly to unseat the Mad King. This Robert was long buried under layers of bitterness and complacency, but now he had awakened. It chilled Ned to see that dangerous fire lit in his friend's eyes once more. War was coming, or something near it. "We have no proof," Ned said softly, hoping to temper that flame. "What evidence we have is rumor and speculation. Jon Arryn's death, the boy's fall, the children. Then I'll find proof," Robert spat. "But for now, I will not sit idle. Let the Lannisters quake in their shining lion skins if they are guilty. And if they are innocent," he shrugged his mighty shoulders, "then they can prove it. But I'll not wait to watch them tighten some snare around my throne." There came a faint sound of metal-shod footsteps, and both men looked up to see Petyr Baelish lingering in the shadows. Littlefinger wore that perpetual half-smile that made Ned's blood prickle. He was too clever by half, and Ned did not trust him. Robert eyed the Master of Coin with open disdain, for Baelish's cunning had always irritated him. "Your Grace," Littlefinger said with a small bow. "I heard rumor you were in need of certain arrangements, financial ones perhaps." Robert curled a lip. "Begone. I have no patience for talk of coin right now. The only arrangement I need is my sword at the Lannisters' throats." Littlefinger's eyes flicked to Ned, measuring. "Then may I suggest caution, Your Grace? You have powerful creditors, and if the crown's debts come due at a most inconvenient time, well, the Lannisters are quite wealthy, as you know." Robert let out a snarl. "That is precisely their power, isn't it? Gold." "Right. And do you think I would let gold decide my throne? By the gods, I'd smash every coffer in Casterly Rock before I crawled to them for coin." "Enough. Stop prattling and be gone." "Mamatur." Littlefinger bowed low again. "Of course, Your Grace." He cast Ned a final glance, lips still curved in that faint smile, then departed. His footsteps clicked on the stone like distant, mocking applause. Robert breathed heavily, fury roused again. "I'll have him watched too," he said to Ned. "I don't trust that man an inch." Ned did not disagree. He touched Robert's shoulder, meeting the king's gaze as friend and counselor. "Best you rest, Robert. Let me prepare the men for what's to come. Once Stannis arrives, we can plan more concretely. But if the Lannisters suspect we are onto them, they may flee or barricade themselves in the Red Keep, or they'll kill us all," Robert finished for him, voice gruff. "I know. Very well, Ned. Do what you must. I should speak with Cersei. She'll come slinking around soon enough, all honeyed words. I'll not be swayed this time." Ned bowed. "I'll see to the guard placements." The king nodded, and for a moment, the weight of the realm seemed to press upon them both. Robert might bluster, but they had no illusions that a confrontation with Tywin Lannister and all his wealth and cunning would be simple. War never was. Ned withdrew, footsteps echoing into the hall silence. Robert stood alone near the high seat, fists at his sides, breath ragged with the fury that had been building for too many years. When Ned reached the courtyard, he inhaled the cooler air of late afternoon. The sun was drifting lower, painting the turrets with a gentle gold. Yet the color reminded him uncomfortably of the Lannister sigil. He found Jory Castle, his loyal captain of the guard, instructing a few Winterfell men in city watch protocol. Jory straightened when he saw Ned approach, his face eager for orders. "Gather our men," Ned murmured to Jory. "The king wants a watch around the Red Keep. No one leaves without our knowledge. Keep to the shadows if you can, but be certain the men are well armed. The Lannisters might test us." Jory bowed swiftly, turning to carry out the orders. Ned watched him go, proud of the man's loyalty but worried what fate might have in store. Already the city's tension seemed thickening, the wind changing direction as though carrying the scent of blood on the horizon. He made his way along the outer wall, peering over the parapets. Beyond the Red Keep's battlements lay the teeming city of King's Landing. Dirty rooftops and winding streets, a labyrinth that had swallowed many a soul. Further still, shining in the evening light, the black water of the bay sparkled with the torchlights of ships at anchor. He tried to imagine Stannis' ships on the horizon, war galleys from Dragonstone or Storm's End, perhaps even the might of House Baratheon's navy gliding into the harbor. A wave of relief warred with dread. This time, the war might not be as clear-cut as the rebellion when they had known who the tyrant was. Aerys Targaryen. Now, the foe was cunning, embedded in the very heart of the court, and far from alone. The memory of Jon Arryn's death twisted in Ned's mind. Jon had been like a father to him and Robert both, the man who had fostered them. If the Lannisters had orchestrated his death, the price must be paid in blood. But the older Ned grew, the less appetite he had for that currency. Still, honor demanded justice, and if it must be done, he would see it through. A quiet footfall behind him. Varys, the master of whisperers, approached with that uncanny tread, hands folded in the sleeves of his robes. His bald head gleamed in the evening sun. "My Lord Hand," he said in his soft voice, "I see much turmoil in your eyes." Ned turned with measured caution. "It is the city that's in turmoil, Varys. The king has grown suspicious of Lannister motives." "Sorry." "Indeed," Varys said, his voice a purr. "And suspicion can be a dangerous seed to plant, especially when the Lannisters have the gold to cultivate their own harvest." Ned exhaled. "Tell me plainly, do you believe they murdered Jon Arryn?" Varys pursed his lips. "Belief is a tricky thing. I have heard many rumors, each more disturbing than the last. Some whisper poison. Others speak of a confrontation that ended poorly. But if you ask me for proof, well, I am but a whisper, my lord. I can only pass on what the little birds sing to me." "Man, your whispers always carry some truth, if one knows how to sift it," Ned said, softening his tone. "If we move against the Lannisters now, there is no turning back. The king has made his mind. Is there anything you can tell me?" Varys studied Ned's face, eyes darting to the city below. "Only that you should keep watch over your daughters, my lord. War spares no one, not even children. If matters escalate, the Red Keep itself may become a prison. I shan't keep you further, but do be cautious. The Lannisters did not survive centuries by being careless." "No." With that cryptic warning, Varys drifted away, melting into the gloom of an archway. Ned watched him go, his own heartbeat thrumming a slow cadence of dread. He recalled the vow he had made, to keep Sansa and Arya safe. He intended to send them north, but time had been slipping by. Now, with the king on the brink of confrontation, was it too late? He descended from the wall, searching for his daughters, wanting to speak to them. Yet, halfway across the courtyard, he caught sight of Cersei Lannister herself, sweeping through the gates with a retinue of Lannister guards. Her golden hair flowed behind her, and her green eyes flashed. When she saw him, she barely inclined her head in acknowledgement. They had never been warm, but now the tension was a tangible thing. "The king is expecting you," Ned said, not unkindly. "He is in the Great Hall." Cersei's voice was like silk, but it had edges. "I imagined he might be. He had an outburst earlier, I'm told." Ned made no move to confirm or deny. He only stepped aside, letting her pass. She drifted close enough that he caught the sweet scent of perfumed oils. Leaning in, she lowered her voice, so only he could hear. "You think you can outmaneuver my house, Lord Stark? You underestimate what a lion will do when cornered." Her words ignited a spark in Ned's chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Cornered or not, if your house is guilty of treason, there will be justice." Her lips curved in something resembling a smile. Then, without another word, she swept onward, her guards trailing. Ned was left with the distinct impression of standing on a battlefield, just as thunderheads gathered overhead, a hush that comes before a deadly storm. That night, King's Landing did not sleep easily. Word spread among the servants and lesser courtiers that something was brewing. The Red Keep's corridors were patrolled by double the usual guard. Doors that were once left open were now guarded. The flicker of torchlight revealed uneasy faces, uncertain loyalties. Through it all, the king's temper smoldered, and Ned braced himself for the coming of dawn. When the morning broke gray and cool, a horn blast from the bay alerted them to a new arrival. Ned, having slept little, rushed to the ramparts. Through the mist, he spied the great sails of the Baratheon stag, black on gold. Stannis had come. A dozen war galleys followed his flagship. Overhead, gulls wheeled and cried, as if heralding the new wave of potential violence arriving on the city's shores. Ned descended to the yard to greet him. Robert joined soon after, dressed in chainmail under a fine surcoat of velvet, black with the crowned stag embroidered in shining gold thread. There was no feast laid out, no warm welcome, only the bracing tension of a city about to tear itself apart. Even the stable boys and cooks watched from corners, silent. They could sense the mood. The king was not in a welcoming posture. When Stannis Baratheon entered the courtyard, he came with the austerity of a man who despised pomp. He wore plain dark armor, the Baratheon sigil etched discreetly on his breastplate. His jaw was set, lips a thin line. The only sign of brotherly respect was a curt nod he gave Robert before bending his knee. "Your Grace," Stannis said, voice somber, "I came at your summons." Robert strode forward and raised his brother to his feet with a firm grip on the arm. For a moment, the old bitterness between them was palpable. But Robert clasped Stannis' shoulder in something akin to relief. "I'm glad you came, brother." Stannis' gaze flicked around the courtyard, noting the many watchers in corners and on the walls. "You have doubled the guard. I suspect there's more to this summons than a friendly reunion." Robert let out a humorless laugh. "Friendly reunions were never your forte, Stannis. Let's speak inside. I have much to tell you." Ned rewound. As they made their way into the Red Keep, Ned followed close behind. He caught glimpses of Stannis' expression, the set of his mouth. He was a man who believed in duty above all else, but somewhere in that stern exterior burned a relentless thirst for justice, and recognition perhaps for the role he had played in Robert's rebellion. But Robert had never shown him the love or gratitude he deserved. That was part of their sour history. They convened in a smaller council chamber, rather than the great hall, a wood-paneled room with narrow windows that let in slivers of pale light. Inside waited Barristan, Renly Baratheon, and a few trusted knights of House Baratheon. Renly had arrived earlier that morning by horseback. Younger, more handsome, he was the brother Robert found easiest to love, though Stannis had little warmth for him. The tension between the two younger Baratheons was a subdued hum beneath the conversation. Robert signaled for wine, though he took only a small cup. Once the servants withdrew, he paced like a restless bull. Stannis stood rigid, arms crossed, while Renly lounged near a chair, arms folded in an attitude of lazy confidence. Ned took up a position near the door, watchful. "At last," Robert began. "I can speak plainly. We have reason to believe the Lannisters are plotting against the crown. Jon Arryn discovered something that cost him his life, I wager. Ned Stark suspects their guilt in the boy's fall at Winterfell, and I trust his judgment more than anyone here. Now, I mean to root them out, tear away their power, before they strike. I've called you both, because I need House Baratheon unified." "Men? That's Unir." Stannis spoke first, his tone cool. "You suspect treason. You must have more than suspicion." Robert's face darkened. He looked to Ned, who cleared his throat. Jon Arryn was investigating the parentage of the Queen's children. He visited certain blacksmith shops and examined the royal genealogies. He asked questions about the hair color of Baratheon offspring. It is possible he discovered something that implicates the Lannister line. We cannot be certain, but the timing of his death is too neat. And then, there's the matter of attempts on the boy's life in Winterfell, and the hasty actions of the Queen's brother, Jaime Lannister. Neptune. Renly frowned, exchanging a quick look with Stannis. That's quite the claim. You're suggesting the heirs to the throne might be, not Robert's. Ned did not relish speaking this aloud, but he saw no way around it. I cannot say for certain, but that is the implication. Stannis' frown deepened. If that is true, then the rightful line of succession is threatened. Robert's children, they may not be his. Now, a hush fell. Robert's face twisted in pain and fury. He grabbed a chalice of wine and drained it, then slammed it down. I don't want to speak of it. If it's true, so be it. If not, then let the seven burn me for a fool. But either way, we must act. I will not let the Lannisters rule my throne behind my back. Stannis pressed his lips together. And what action do you propose? The only action that makes sense, Robert said. We seize the queen and her brother. We question them, demand the truth. Tywin Lannister will never submit quietly. So we prepare for war. We can strike Casterly Rock with ships from Dragonstone, or threaten their gold mines. Or both, if necessary. Renly ventured a cautious remark. That might incite the Lannisters to revolt openly. The realm will bleed, brother. Is there no more discreet way? Robert shook his head, face set. We tried discreet. Jon Arryn tried discreet, and it got him killed. No, I'll have the realm see that the crown does not stand for treason. Ned, you will command the city watch to secure the Red Keep. Stannis, you control the fleet and your loyal bannermen in the Stormlands. I'll rally the Crownlands and call my banners as well. We present the Lannisters with a show of force they cannot ignore. Liamdashkar. Stannis nodded, though his gaze was stern. So be it. If the king commands, I obey. But you must be ready for an extended conflict. Tywin Lannister is no fool. He will not kneel easily. Robert's eyes blazed. Let him try to defy me. He'll learn what it means to face the strength of House Baratheon. Their meeting continued in hushed tones, finalizing the details. By midday, ravens would fly to the Stormlords, summoning them to muster. Orders would be given to the city watch. Meanwhile, the king would summon the queen for a private confrontation, accompanied by the King's Guard. It was a bold move, perhaps reckless. But Robert Baratheon had always been guided by his instincts and passion. This time was no different. Ned left the chamber with the weight of the plan on his shoulders. He hastened to speak with his men, preparing them for what might happen once the queen was detained. The city watch was a fickle force, more loyal to gold than to the throne, but Ned knew the king had some loyal captains left. He met with Janos Slynt, the commander of the city watch, a man Ned eyed with caution. Slynt was ambitious and easily swayed, but Robert had promised him rewards for loyalty. Time would tell if that promise held. As the hours passed, tension spread through the Red Keep like a fever. Servants whispered in corridors about the closeted meeting. Lannister guards hovered near the queen's apartments, uncertain. Ned stood in the courtyard once more, the midday sun glaring hotly upon his shoulders. He watched as the king emerged from the tower, followed by Ser Barristan, Ser Meryn Trant, and two more Kingsguard in shining white cloaks. Stannis and Renly flanked him in their distinct attire, with Ned and a small contingent of Stark men behind. It was an imposing sight, purposeful and grim. They advanced upon the queen's quarters. The guards there stiffened. One had the Lannister lion on his breastplate. Robert barked, "Step aside, or lose your head. I come to speak with my wife on a matter of grave importance." "One." "Antikomu." The guards exchanged glances, but the presence of so many heavily armed knights and the king himself overcame any hesitation. They parted. The double doors swung open, revealing a plush reception chamber filled with tapestries of gold and crimson. Cersei Lannister stood near a window, her slender frame shrouded in a gown of emerald green that made her eyes sparkle like twin shards of ice. Jaime Lannister was with her, clad in gleaming armor that caught the sunlight. He was adjusting his sword belt, a wary tension in his posture. Robert and his retinue filled the chamber in a rush of bootsteps and clinking steel. Cersei arched a brow, surveying them with a calm too perfect to be real. "What is the meaning of this?" Jaime asked, though he spoke lightly. "The king rides forth in force to greet his queen, or is there some other reason?" Robert glowered. "Step away from her, Kingslayer. I have words for my wife, and I'll not speak them over a drawn sword." Jaime's gaze flicked to the Kingsguard behind Robert. A smirk played on his lips. "As you wish." He stepped aside, though the confidence in his posture did not waver. Robert turned his attention to Cersei. "You know why I'm here." She lifted her chin. "Enlighten me, my husband." "I would so love to hear your reasoning." Her words dripped with condescension, but Robert barreled on, his anger barely contained. "Jon Arryn is dead. Bran Stark nearly died. My friend Ned Stark has discovered that you and your brother hide dark secrets. Are the children truly mine?" His voice rose in fury, but behind that anger, a pain simmered that no blade could match. "Or have you betrayed me, Cersei?" A heartbeat of silence. Then Cersei gave a cool smile. "You come to me with these accusations now, after all of these years. How easily men are swayed by rumor. Men have been killed for less." Robert snarled. "I want answers. If I find you've played me false, not all the gold in Casterly Rock will save you." Jaime cleared his throat, stepping forward. The Kingsguard tensed, but Jaime only tilted his head. "This is a dangerous path you tread, Your Grace. Do you truly want to tear apart your own family on the basis of a few rumors?" Robert's fists clenched. "Do not speak of family, you who put your sword through the Mad King's back. I know your brand of honor, Lannister." Before tempers could flare further, Ned spoke, stepping forward. "Your Grace, let us proceed with caution. If the Queen has nothing to hide, she can allow us to confirm the children's lineage. If she refuses, well..." He trailed off, letting the implication hang. Cersei's eyes snapped to him, a flash of resentment. "You dare speak to me of my children as though they are an inconvenience? We are speaking of the royal heirs. You would subject them to what? A test of hair color? A paternity question? Has the realm truly stooped so low under your rule, Robert, that you distrust your own blood?" "Nana de Shadel." Robert's face was red as raw meat. "I do not recall you letting me near you in the bedchamber these last years. I do recall your brother's presence at every turn. The timing, the rumors..." He snarled a curse under his breath. "We will see them, Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen. Now. They are children, Robert," Cersei said, but her voice wavered, though only slightly. "What do you hope to find, truly? If you wish to question them, do it. But do not think I will stand by while you terrorize them." "Mentise." Stannis cleared his throat. "This is no time for feigned outrage, my lady. If the children are indeed legitimate, a quick inquiry will end the rumors. If not, then you know what that means. It means the entire line of succession is a lie," Renly murmured, crossing his arms. There was a hint of sympathy in his eyes, but also a measure of resolve. "We must know." The Queen's composure slipped. A mask of brittle arrogance replaced it. She gestured sharply to a Lannister guard. "Fetch the children. If this farce must be played out, so be it." "Nay." And Jaime moved to protest, but Cersei silenced him with a glare. The guard hurried away, returning minutes later with the 3 royal children. Joffrey was tall for his age, golden-haired, sullen. Myrcella clutched his arm, trembling slightly, her lovely golden curls spilling around her shoulders. Tommen, the youngest, tried to hide behind his siblings, confusion in his wide eyes. Ned's heart twisted. He thought of his own daughters. These children were blameless if there was any wrongdoing. The thought of condemning them made his soul ache. But he schooled his face to calm. Robert stared at them, face contorting, seeing his own coloring in none of them. Not the black hair that every Baratheon child had borne for centuries. Instead, they were golden, like the Lannisters. "They're mine," Cersei said in a voice that was almost defiant. The hush in the chamber was terrible. Joffrey glanced around, fear and anger in his eyes, sensing something was deeply wrong. The tension was suffocating. Robert's face purpled with rage. "Do not lie to me, woman," he thundered. "Look at them. Do you see any sign of my blood? Surmai. He advanced on Joffrey, who recoiled. Father? Joffrey asked, voice uncertain. What's happening? Robert stared into the boy's face, eyes flicking across his features. Then with a growl, he turned aside, pacing to the far end of the chamber. Silence weighed like lead. Stannis' jaw was clenched, his fists tight at his sides. Renly looked away, as if to avoid the tragedy unfolding. Jaime Lannister's posture was tensed, hand near his sword. Cersei's knuckles were white, her nails biting her palms. She forced a laugh, a mocking, hollow sound. My children have Lannister features, that's true. I have Lannister blood, in case you've forgotten. Is that a crime? Ned exchanged a glance with Stannis. The king turned with a fierce scowl. I'll have the maesters examine them, test them in any way they can. If it's confirmed they are not my blood, I will have the truth, whether you confess or not. Until then, you and your brother are under watch. You will not leave the Red Keep. If the children are found to be bastards, then you will answer for treason, and for Jon Arryn's death. Now get them out of my sight. Menamsi. Cersei's composure snapped like a twig. How dare you speak of them as though they are nothing? Do you think Tywin Lannister will stand idly by while you insult our house? Robert advanced on her, eyes burning. Let him do what he will. I welcome the challenge. If it's war he wants, war go, woman. Before I do something I'll regret. Jaime stepped between them. I suggest you choose your words carefully, he said in a low voice. Gaze locked on Robert. Threaten Cersei again, and you might lose more than your throne. A lion does not. Before he could finish, Robert smashed a gauntleted fist into Jaime's jaw. Jaime staggered, catching himself before he fell. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. The king's guard behind Robert surged forward, swords half drawn, uncertain if they should intervene. Jaime pressed a hand to his lip, fury blazing in his green eyes. But he did not strike back. Not yet. The children cried out, and Myrcella began to sob. Take them away, Ned ordered one of the king's men. Remove them to their chambers. The Lannister guard hesitated, but under the weight of so many swords, he had no choice. He gently escorted the children out, their faces streaked with confusion and tears. Cersei followed, her eyes full of venom, Jaime at her side. He spared one last glance at Robert, that old arrogance replaced by something darker, more lethal. When they were gone, Robert stood in the center of the chamber, chest heaving. His rage and heartbreak filled the space like thunder. Stannis and Renly exchanged looks, each grappling with this catastrophic shift. Ned placed a tentative hand on Robert's shoulder, though he hardly knew what comfort to offer. That's done then, Robert muttered. Damn them all. After a long pause, Stannis spoke, voice steeled. We must prepare for Tywin Lannister's response. He will not rest while his daughter is held captive. If the children are proven bastards, it undermines the entire alliance with House Lannister. War is imminent. Renly nodded, though he looked sorrowful. The realm will bleed, my brothers. We must be certain of our next step. Robert exhaled heavily, brushing Ned's hand away. Then see it done. Gather the gold cloaks. Ensure we hold King's Landing. Stannis, return to your ships. Be ready to blockade Lannister trade. I'll issue ravens to the lords of the realm, clarifying the nature of this treason. We'll not hide in corners. If Tywin wants to bring his bannermen, let him. We will be waiting. Ned studied Robert's face, seeing the lines etched by years of frustration, the broken illusions about the wife he had married for the sake of politics. He regretted that the truth had needed to be revealed in such a brutal fashion, but there was no turning back now. They left the chamber with a sense of finality, moving through the corridors with renewed urgency. Outside, the Red Keep was awash in restless energy. Word of the confrontation had not spread yet, but it soon would. Soldiers stationed themselves at strategic points, and the banners of House Baratheon flapped in the wind, overshadowing the golden lions that once so proudly displayed their presence. In a single stroke, Robert had upended the alliance that had kept the throne secure for years. All the gold in Casterly Rock, could not bury the truth that Ned Stark had uncovered. At the stables, Ned paused to watch as King Robert and Stannis parted ways. Stannis marched stiffly, a line of loyal knights behind him, heading back to the harbor to oversee the ships. Renly lingered, dividing his attention between the two older brothers, uncertain which path to follow. Ned felt pity for the young Baratheon, caught between family loyalties and political maneuvers. Yet, Ned had no illusions. In wars, families were torn asunder, and illusions died swiftly. Duty demanded he remain at Robert's side, help him keep the peace, if peace was still possible. But the undercurrent of dread told him the realm was sliding toward bloodshed. Tywin Lannister was not a man to let an insult, much less a detention of his daughter, go unavenged. Throughout the afternoon, ravens took flight from the rookery, carrying urgent messages to the great lords of Westeros. Ned composed the letters alongside Robert, each word heavy with the knowledge that it might be the final wedge to drive the realm into another rebellion. The king's seal pressed into each letter with a wax stamp, leaving the sign of the stag for all to see. The realm would soon learn of the accusations against House Lannister. Some might rally to the king's side out of loyalty or hatred for the Lannisters. Others might weigh the gold Tywin could offer. The stage was set. When dusk came, Ned found himself alone in his chambers, gazing out at the city where torches flickered in the gloom. Sansa and Arya were with Septa Mordane, mercifully ignorant of the day's events. He wanted to take them away from all this, send them north where the shadows of war might not reach. But he knew in his heart that the war would reach every corner of the Seven Kingdoms if Tywin raised his banners. The north would not be spared. He could do little for their safety, except keep them close, protect them with what men he had. He thought of Catelyn, far away at the Crossroads Inn with Tyrion Lannister in custody. News of that had not yet reached the king. But if that, too, came to light, it would only add to the tension. So many threads converging, all leading to blood. Ned rubbed his temples, exhaustion pulling at him. A soft knock on the door broke his thoughts. He opened it to find Jory Castle standing there, face grim. "My lord, the gold cloaks have taken positions throughout the Red Keep. Janos Slynt awaits your instruction. Also, I heard that Lord Tywin's forces may be mustering in the west." Ned nodded. "Tell Slynt to hold the gates. No one enters or leaves without the king's seal. As for Tywin, let him muster. We'll be ready." Jory gave a salute and turned to go. Ned paused, wanting to say something reassuring, but nothing came to mind. The man had followed him faithfully from Winterfell to King's Landing. Now they stood at the threshold of a conflict neither truly wanted. Alone again, Ned closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a long breath. The day had been a whirlwind. Stannis and Renly had arrived. The Queen and Jaime had been confronted, the children's paternity questioned in the harshest manner. Only a night had passed since Robert first declared his intention to act, and already the realm trembled. He stepped back to the narrow window, where the city lights spread below. The stink of the capital pressed in from the night air, a foul mixture of rot and waste. Yet among the squalor, thousands of souls lived their lives, blissfully unaware that their fates might hinge on the ambitions and grudges of the noble houses. Ned's lips tightened. His father had once taught him that high lords played their Game of Thrones, and the small folk paid the price. He prayed it would not come to that, but his hope was faint. A new day would dawn, and with it, the king's justice, or the king's folly. War was at their doorstep, with the proud lion challenging the furious stag. Yet the wolf of the north stood beside the stag. That alliance, forged in Robert's rebellion, would be tested again. Ned vowed silently that, come what may, he would serve honor and justice to the best of his ability. If blood must be shed to preserve the realm from deceit, then let the gods have mercy on them all. He watched a raven pass overhead, a black shape against the moonlit sky. The city sprawled into the distance, towers and spires bathed in faint silver light. Far to the west, Casterly Rock loomed, home to the mightiest lion in Westeros. If Tywin Lannister received word of his daughter's predicament, he would not wait. If these children proved false heirs, the realm would be shaken to its core, alliances shattered, loyalties tested in ways unforeseen. Ned could sense the chain of events unraveling. Robert's roaring anger, Stannis' rigid righteousness, Cersei's desperate cunning, Tywin's pride, Jaime's arrogance, all were pieces on a board that no one player controlled fully. Ned prayed to the old gods and knew for a peaceful resolution. But his heart told him that steel and fire were in their future. Night deepened, and the Red Keep settled into uneasy quiet. Guards patrolled by torchlight, their footsteps echoing in the ancient corridors. Ned finally let himself rest, though sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of war, of ravens with blood on their beaks, of children's cries echoing in empty halls. He saw Robert and Stannis locked in battle with lions made of gold and shadow, while ravens circled overhead. By the time dawn's first light crept into his chamber, Ned rose, still weary. The day had come for decisions, and for the slow roll of fate. The king had made his choice: crush the Lannisters. Ned Stark stood at his side, though trepidation weighed heavily on him. It was only day one of this confrontation, and already the chords of war were strummed. The future bristled with possibilities, most of them dark. He dressed and went forth into the corridors. He felt the weight of his sword on his hip, an old comfort. Robert was likely rousing in his own chambers, hungover with anger. If not with drink, Stannis might still be at the harbor, consolidating his hold on the fleet. Renly would be planning something, perhaps forging alliances of his own. The chessboard was set, but the pieces were not done moving. And the Lannisters, caged for the moment, were the most dangerous of all. What if peace was still possible? If the queen confessed, if the children were proven innocent, if Tywin chose not to fight? Ned almost laughed bitterly at such hopeful notions. He knew men like Tywin Lannister did not forgive insults or yield easily. The seeds of chaos had been sown. The next days would determine how deeply they took root. Yet Ned Stark was, above all, a man of honor. He would not shirk the path laid before him. If the Lannisters had indeed committed these crimes, there must be reckoning. With a steadying breath, he left the corridor behind, heading to greet the king. Step by step, he moved forward into the morrow's uncertain light, heart heavy with the knowledge that once the sword was unsheathed, it could not be easily returned to its scabbard. And the clamor that accompanied such a sword would echo not just in King's Landing, but throughout the Seven Kingdoms. A.K. Dawn's early light cast long shadows across the stone floors of the Red Keep. The faint orange glow seeped through narrow windows, heralding a new day full of unspoken promises and looming perils. Ned Stark had slept little, turning over the events of the previous day in his mind as he lay in bed, the faint sounds of the city drifting through the walls. Now, as he moved down the corridor in quiet steps, he felt the heaviness in the air. King's Landing itself seemed to hold its breath. He was on his way to meet Robert again, drawn by the urgent summons of a page who had knocked timidly at Ned's door. The youth was breathless, stammering something about the king demanding the hand's presence at once. Ned's sense of foreboding quickened. The day before had been rife with confrontations. A swirl of accusations, the unimaginable possibility of Robert's children being fathered by Jaime Lannister, the imprisonment of Cersei and her brother under watchful guard. Tensions had soared, unspoken alliances splintered, and now the entire realm perched on a precarious edge. He passed a pair of gold cloaks stationed at a corner. They saluted sharply when they recognized the hand of the king. Ned nodded, continuing forward, reflecting how quickly the corridors had become thick with soldiers. The Red Keep bristled with steel, an uneasy hush to every station. In a single day, the entire seat of power had transformed into something more akin to a fortress under siege, as if the city were expecting an army at its gates at any hour. When Ned entered the king's solar, he found Robert already awake and pacing. The king wore a rumpled tunic, its fine velvet collar askew, as though he'd thrown it on in a hurry. Dark circles rimmed Robert's eyes, and his hair stuck out in wild tangles. He might have been up all night. A half-eaten haunch of roasted boar lay on a tray nearby, untouched except for a few ragged bites. Robert's appetite, usually so insatiable, seemed subdued. Renly stood off to one side, arms folded across his chest. eyes ringed with fatigue. He offered Ned a brief, weary smile. On the other side of the chamber was Lord Stannis, expression carved from granite as always, his jaw set in a line so rigid it looked painful. Nearby, Ser Barristan Selmy waited, silent and tense, while several other knights in Baratheon livery clustered by the door, weapons at their hips. "You came quickly, Ned," Robert said with a short nod, voice gruff from lack of rest. "Good. We've had developments." Ned closed the door behind him. "What developments?" Stannis turned those piercing blue eyes on him. "A raven from the west. Tywin Lannister has mobilized his bannermen. They march to Casterly Rock and gather in numbers we cannot ignore." The letter didn't mince words. "We either free his daughter at once or prepare for war. He says he will accept nothing less than the unconditional release of Cersei and Jaime. He also demands restitution." "Majesty," Renly snorted. "Restitution for what?" The gall of it. Robert's face twisted. "He claims we've insulted his house beyond measure, threatened his grandchildren, and assaulted his son. Even put them under armed guard. In Tywin's eyes, that's a direct affront to Lannister pride." He gripped the edge of a table, arms tensed. "So, as expected, the old lion bears his claws. Let him come." Ned stood quietly, absorbing this news. War seemed inevitable now. There was no stepping back from the precipice. The lines were drawn. "How large is his host?" Stannis exhaled, the sound akin to a hiss. "Reports say near 20,000 men. And that's only the start. House Lannister can field more if they call upon certain sworn houses in the west. If they hire sellswords, or if other lords decide to side with them, well, the numbers could become troubling." Robert pounded the table with a thick fist. "He wants me to cower. He thinks I'll bend. Well, I won't. This throne cost me blood and sweat to gain, and I'll not hand it over to a damned lion." "None." Renly spoke in a more measured tone. "Brother, there's another matter. The Lannisters have money, and money can buy loyalty. Even the City Watch could be swayed if the gold flows from Casterly Rock. Our coffers are nearly empty. War is expensive, and the realm's debts to the Iron Bank remain unsettled. We need to ensure the gold cloaks remain loyal to you, not the highest bidder." Robert let out a barking laugh with no humor. "Let them try to bribe the gold cloaks. I'll have Slint's head if he dares betray me." "That's our..." Ned cleared his throat. "We can't rely on fear alone to keep them in line. Though war may be upon us, men will fight for coin and switch sides when it's convenient if there is no deeper loyalty. We should ensure the gold cloaks are well paid at least, and quickly." Renly flicked his gaze toward Stannis. "We might also consider forging alliances. The Tyrells, for instance. They still hold resentment toward the Lannisters for overshadowing them in influence at court. If we can secure the Tyrells' support, that might offset the Lannister gold and provide men enough to match them if it comes to open battle. Then..." Robert looked unconvinced, but he didn't dismiss the idea outright. "The Tyrells are proud, and Mace Tyrell is as fickle as a spinster gossip. If it suits him, he'll pledge his thousands of swords. If it doesn't, we'll find them at our throats. But yes, perhaps you're right. The best move might be to lure them in." His shoulders slumped. "I'll write to him. Or better yet, you do it, Renly. You've a way with courtesies. Promise the Tyrells something. Positions in court, advantageous marriages, whatever it takes. Just get them on our side." None. Ned knew the Tyrell host, should it be mustered, could rival any in Westeros. To have the Reach at their backs would give the Baratheons a fighting chance. Yet forging alliances took time, and Tywin Lannister would not tarry. They needed to move swiftly. Robert paced the length of the solar, glowering out the window where the sun had fully risen, blazing bright across the rooftops of King's Landing. "For now, we hold the city. Stannis will ensure the sea is secure. No ships in or out without my leave. Ned, you will oversee the city's defenses, the gold cloaks, the gates. No one is to exit King's Landing without express permission from me or you. I want to ensure no Lannister loyalists can flee to inform Tywin of our weaknesses. Is that clear? Ned nodded. Yes, Your Grace. Renly stepped forward, voice subdued. What of the Queen and her brother? They remain in custody. Are we to keep them under guard indefinitely? That alone is enough to spark Tywin's wrath. We can't release them, Robert growled. Not when we're this close to proving their treachery. The Maesters are still gathering what they need. Genealogical charts, notes from Jon Arryn's inquiries. There is a blacksmith's apprentice. He paused, looking to Ned. That lad you mentioned, Gendry. We suspect he's my bastard. Jon Arryn visited him before he died. If the lad's parentage can be verified, it may support the idea that all my true-born bastards come out with black hair, and that those golden-haired children are not mine. Damn, I never wanted to see the day I had to parade bastards to prove my own bloodline. Stannis cleared his throat. Has the boy been found? Ned nodded. I sent men to fetch him quietly. We should have him soon enough. But that's only one piece of the puzzle. Then the puzzle will be completed, Robert said tightly. And once we have irrefutable proof the children are not mine, I'll see them disinherited, along with their mother and uncle's heads on spikes, unless they confess to the murder of Jon Arryn. He looked to Ned, voice low. I do not relish the idea of killing children, Ned, but if Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen truly aren't mine, then what else can I do? Can I let them remain as claimants to the throne? They'll always be a threat, especially Joffrey. Damn it all! Ned bowed his head, feeling the weight of that question. The children were innocent in this, by all sense of morality. Yet the realm's politics were merciless. A false heir was a risk Robert could not permit. We can address it once we have the proof, Your Grace, Ned said carefully. No sense condemning them before we know. Robert grunted, in reluctant agreement. Then that is the plan. We gather our proof. We hold them. We prepare for Tywin's next move. And if he brings war, we'll answer with a war of our own. He looked around, as if daring anyone to oppose him. No one did. They dispersed under the king's orders, each with tasks to fulfill. Ned found himself walking the corridors again, mind buzzing with the ramifications. He set about gathering men loyal to House Stark and the Crown, ensuring their watches were meticulously assigned. The tension was like a bowstring drawn taut. One misstep, and it would snap. By midday, Ned found a moment to see his daughters. He went to the royal apartment set aside for his household, where Sansa and Arya waited under the care of Septa Mordain. The moment Ned stepped inside, Sansa rushed to him, tears shimmering in her eyes. Arya followed, looking worried but less apt to cry. "Father," Sansa said, voice trembling. "What is happening?" "The castle is so tense, and the other ladies say the king had the queen arrested." "Is that true? Will they hurt the children?" "Princess Myrcella is my friend." "Nain." Ned felt his chest tighten. He rested a reassuring hand on Sansa's shoulder. "There are difficult matters at court, Sansa. I can't share the details, but you must trust me. Stay inside, remain vigilant. Do not wander the corridors without guards. These are dangerous times." Arya's dark eyes flicked with a mixture of curiosity and fear. "Are we at war, Father?" Ned crouched, so he was at eye level with his daughters, voice gentle. "It seems likely there will be conflict, but I'll do everything in my power to keep you both safe. If the situation worsens, I may send you north back to Winterfell, where your mother is. For now, stay close to your rooms. The Red Keep is under heavy guard, so you will not be harmed so long as you don't do anything reckless." "Damn." Arya's lips pressed into a line. She looked ready to protest that she could defend herself, maybe mention her lessons with Syrio Forel. But she glanced at Sansa's frightened face and stayed quiet. Sansa spoke again, more hushed. "I don't want to leave King's Landing. I like it here. I was hoping," she bit her lip, "hoping to grow close to Prince Joffrey again." Ned's heart twisted. He touched her cheek gently. "For now, concentrate on your own safety, my girl. The rest will be sorted out in time." They spent a moment in silence, Sansa blinking back tears and Arya scowling at the injustice of it all. Ned rose and nodded to Septa Mordain, who lowered her head solemnly, sensing the gravity of the moment. Ned left them, the feeling of dread intensifying. Joffrey had been a poor betrothal match from the start, in Ned's mind, but the entire realm had wanted that union to cement the Lannister-Baratheon bond. Now that bond lay in ruins. In the corridors, Ned passed more and more gold cloaks stationed in vigilant lines. Servants rushed about with anxious faces. He took note of the hush that fell whenever he approached. Whispers trailed behind him as though the tower walls themselves were murmuring rumors of war. Before long, he found himself in front of a heavy, iron-bound door. Two of Robert's personal guards stood outside, men from the Stormlands, each wearing the crowned stag on their surcoats. Inside was where Jaime Lannister was being held. Ned paused, uncertain whether he truly wanted to see the man. Yet some sense of duty compelled him to speak to the Kingslayer. Ned nodded to the guards. "I'm going in." They unbarred the door and stepped aside. The air inside was close, dimly lit by a single torch on the wall. The cell was more comfortable than a typical dungeon cell, but it was hardly luxurious. Straw covered the flagstone floor, and a simple cot was pushed against the wall. Jaime Lannister sat there, arms folded, his once sparkling armor stripped away, replaced by a plain tunic and breeches. His golden hair hung loose, framing a face that wore a perpetual smirk, at least until he caught sight of Ned. "Stark," Jaime said, lazy mockery in his tone. "Come to gloat? To watch the Kingslayer rot in a cell? Or perhaps you want answers about poor little Bran?" Ned's anger flared at the mention of his son. He stepped closer, voice low. "You have the nerve to speak his name. My boy is still in a broken body because of you. Or your sister. Or both. I mean to see you answer for your crimes." Then, Jaime's expression flickered, but then the arrogance returned. "Crimes? The line grows so long, doesn't it? And you Northerners are so very solemn. I might die of boredom in this cell before I die of any executioner's sword." Ned clenched his fists. "War is brewing. Your father calls his banners. I'd expect nothing less of Lord Tywin." Jaime leaned back as if unconcerned. "He'll come, and he'll break you all if you harm me or the Queen. Let me guess. You found some worthless scraps of evidence that my sweet sister's children aren't Robert's. Is that it? You always were too honorable for your own good, Stark. This city doesn't run on honor. It runs on gold." Ned's toned. Ned felt a stirring of revulsion, remembering the day he found Jaime seated on the Iron Throne after the Mad King's demise, that smug look of triumph on his face. "You'll get no sympathy from me, Lannister. I only came to see the face of the man who threatened my family." "I didn't push your boy," Jaime said in a measured tone. "Is that what you want to hear? Cersei and I were engaged in something best left unsaid, and the boy spied us. But it was not my hand that sent him from that tower. I simply wasn't quick enough to stop what happened. Then Ned's stomach lurched. Jaime's voice carried that mocking lilt, yet behind it was a flicker of something else. Regret, perhaps, or a twisted sense of justification. "You're saying Cersei pushed him? She panicked, I suppose." Jaime shrugged. "And after we did what we could to keep it quiet. The rest you know. Poor Bran nearly died." He paused, eyes flicking away. "Would you have done differently to protect your own secrets? You, who fathered a bastard somewhere while you left your wife in the north." Ned's rage burned white-hot. "I will not stand here and be lectured by a man who murdered his king, then tumbled his sister." Jaime's laughter cut him off, sharp as broken glass. "You play at virtue, Stark, but we're all pieces on the board. You want me to confess to everything so you can skewer me on a pike and call it justice. But if it means anything, I never wanted to harm your son. I still don't." Ned stared hard at him. "It means nothing. You'll face justice soon enough." Done. Turning on his heel, Ned stalked to the door. Jaime's words followed him, echoing in that half-lit space. "When Tywin's host arrives, you'll regret this, Stark." Ned said nothing. The guards closed and barred the door behind him. The corridor's stale air felt almost refreshing by comparison, though he was shaken by the conversation. If Jaime's words were true, then Cersei had tried to kill Bran. But the distinction meant little. Jaime had stood by, done nothing afterward except help cover it up. If that was not a confession of guilt, it was near enough. He took a moment to gather himself, remembering the boy who once ran along Winterfell's battlements with laughter in his eyes. Bran's life had been shattered, reduced to a bed in heartbreak. And for what? Because he saw something he shouldn't have. The anger that simmered in Ned's chest was a quiet fury, more determined than Robert's roaring wrath. He vowed never to relent until justice was done. Outside, the sun climbed higher, the city shimmering in the day's growing heat. Ned went to the yard, where the gold cloaks and Robert's knights drilled. He inspected their formations, exchanging words with Jory Castle, who stood overseeing a line of Stark men. Jory's expression brightened slightly at Ned's presence. "My lord," Jory said, "we've doubled the watch at the gates as ordered. No one leaves or enters the city without papers bearing the royal seal. The men are uneasy, but they'll obey." Ned nodded, scanning the yard where men clashed practice swords. "Good. Keep them vigilant. We'll likely see trouble soon." Jory lowered his voice. "There are rumors that certain households in King's Landing, minor lords, wealthy merchants, might be offering gold to the watch in exchange for leniency. We're trying to root out any corruption, but it's slippery work." Ned sighed. "I expected as much. Do what you can. If you find any watchmen who take bribes, dismiss them immediately, or arrest them if it's serious. We can't have traitors at our backs." "Aye, my lord." Ned clapped Jory's shoulder and continued on. The fortress city that Robert had wanted, that Tywin Lannister had once carefully stabilized, was now a tinderbox. The slightest spark could ignite chaos. Already, the merchants in Flea Bottom spoke of war. Prices on basic goods were rising. Fear led to hoarding, and hoarding led to unrest. Amid it all, the king's younger brother Renly took charge of the ravens to Highgarden. He labored over letters, sealing them with wax embossed by the stag. Ned glimpsed him in a side chamber, where scribes carefully copied out the same message multiple times. Renly demanded courtesy, flattery, and hints of favorable marriages in each missive. Once done, they sent the ravens to the Reach, hoping Mace Tyrell would see more gain in siding with House Baratheon than House Lannister. Another letter was dispatched to the Vale, where Lysa Arryn held power as regent for her young son, Robert Arryn. But Lysa's mind was a flighty thing. Ned remembered how she had fled King's Landing after her husband's death. Whether she would risk her precious boy in a war was uncertain. Still, any assistance from the Vale would bolster the king's position. By late afternoon, Ned was summoned to the king's council chamber once again, though the small council itself was in disarray. Littlefinger had vanished earlier in the day. None seemed to know where. Varys lurked in corners, offering cryptic hints that some great shift was underfoot. Grand Maester Pycelle was present, though his stooped frame and quavering voice offered little reassurance. The king waited with Stannis, Renly, and a handful of Baratheon bannermen. A table spread with maps lay before them, dotted with markers to represent armies. "We have a new report," Robert said as Ned entered. "Tywin's host is on the move eastward, likely massing near the Gold Road. Words that Gregor Clegane harasses the Riverlands, raiding farmsteads under Lannister colors. If the Tullys intervene, we have potential allies there, though they might also choose caution. Riverrun doesn't want to be overrun by Lannister vengeance." Ned felt a pang of concern for Catelyn's family. House Tully was no friend to the Lannisters. Indeed, Catelyn herself had seized Tyrion Lannister not long ago, taking him north to the Eyrie. That news had not yet collided in full with the events here in King's Landing, or with Tywin's personal move. But if Tywin discovered that his dwarf son was in Tully or Arryn hands, it might stoke his wrath further. He stepped to the table, taking in the wooden tokens denoting key points on the map. One token indicated Tywin's main host. Another marked the seat of House Tully. If Lord Hoster Tully musters, he could potentially block the Lannisters on the Red Fork. But that would mean open war in the Riverlands. Stannis nodded, arms folded. "We want them bottled up, if possible. Better on Tully land than ours. If we can coordinate with House Tully, the Lannisters might get bogged down before they ever threaten King's Landing." "Nani?" Robert let out a weary sigh. "Gods, I don't want a war fought in the Riverlands any more than I want it in the Crown Lands. But we have no choice. That's where Tywin marches first, or so it seems. We must strike or risk him encircling the city. We can't fight them on all fronts. Renly placed a hand on Robert's shoulder. We should finalize alliances swiftly, with the Tullys on our side. And if the Tyrells join, Tywin's hand will be forced. He'll have enemies to the north, east, and south. He'll be encircled, not us. Robert's gaze flicked toward Ned. Can you reach out to your father-in-law? Send a raven to River Run, urging him to muster his forces and block Tywin's approach. Promise him the crown's full support? Ned inclined his head. I will do so at once, Your Grace. They spent another hour poring over the map, discussing strategies. Stannis wanted to dispatch a small fleet to harass Lannisport, perhaps even threaten Casterly Rock from the sea. If they landed a force near the rock, Tywin might be forced to split his army and turn back west. Robert was intrigued by the idea, though it would stretch them thin. Ned cautioned that they should not overextend, or the city could be vulnerable. They bickered, trying to shape a plan that might confound Tywin's superior wealth and cunning. Eventually, Robert rubbed at his eyes. That's enough. My head aches. Gods, I used to love the rush of planning a battle, but now it feels like 1,000 daggers pressed against my temples. I'm going to see about some dinner. Ned, you do the same. We'll talk more in the morning. They dispersed, each weighed down with the knowledge that war's wheels were turning faster than any of them could control. Ned wandered into the courtyard again, seeking a moment of quiet. The sky above had begun to burn with sunset colors. Red, orange, gold. The banners on the ramparts looked almost aflame in that light. King's Landing was not a gentle place, but the hush of dusk momentarily soothed him. He thought of the north, of Winterfell's solemn groves, and the stark beauty of home. He missed it desperately. A soft scuff of boots on stone made him turn. Varys appeared, as if from nowhere, his hands folded in the voluminous sleeves of his lavender robes. He inclined his head in a polite bow. Lord Stark, how fares the realm on this turbulent evening? Ned regarded the spymaster with cautious neutrality. I suspect you already know more than I do. War is nearly upon us. The Lannisters have moved, and the king prepares to respond. Varys pursed his lips. War is a messy business. Spies and secrets lose much of their value when men march in open fields with banners. Still, many do not realize how swiftly chaos can spread. He paused, glancing at Ned. Might I offer a word of guidance? Ned studied him, uncertain if any guidance from the Master of Whisperers could be trusted. Yet, in these times, every scrap of information could matter. Speak. Varys's voice lowered. Queen Cersei is not without her own means of communication. Her father may know far more of our plans than we suspect. I have heard rumors that she placed certain confidants in the Red Keep, who come and go under the pretense of menial tasks. If you want to maintain your advantage, Lord Stark, see to it that no shadow escapes these walls without your notice. Ned's jaw tightened. We've posted guards at every exit, but I'll keep your warning in mind. Thank you. Varys gave a small smile, though it held little warmth. Of course. My goal is the stability of the realm, Lord Stark. Some may doubt that, yet I persist. And one more thing, be mindful of Petyr Baelish. He is adept at slipping between allegiances. If he can turn a profit from chaos, he will. Ned nodded. He needed no reminder of Littlefinger's slippery nature. The man had vanished, likely weaving some new scheme. Ned only hoped it would not threaten them further. Varys drifted away, leaving Ned alone with the sunset. He let the hush envelop him briefly, and in that moment he realized how exhausting it was to be in the capital. The air felt cloying, as if laced with too many secrets and treacheries. He closed his eyes and pictured the Godswood at Winterfell, the towering weirwood with its red leaves and white bark, the quiet reflection of water at the pool's edge. For a heartbeat, he could almost feel that cool northern breeze on his face. Then the city's noise intruded once more, and he opened his eyes to the Red Keep's high walls. The next day dawned with fresh commotion. The Maesters had concluded their examinations of Robert's children. The genealogical records were stacked high, detailing centuries of Baratheon traits. As suspected, they showed a consistent lineage of black-haired offspring whenever Baratheons married into other houses. Cersei's children had none of that trait. Furthermore, the blacksmith's apprentice, Gendry, had been found. Though the boy knew little, his features, a shock of dark hair and a face that bore a strong resemblance to Robert's, spoke volumes. Jon Arryn's secret inquiries thus stood confirmed. Ned listened solemnly as Grand Maester Pycelle droned on about the genealogical texts in front of the king and the assembled court. Robert sat on the Iron Throne, the seat of swords that had always seemed to mock him. His face twisted, fists clenched on the armrests. Across the hall, Queen Cersei stood flanked by guards, her expression guarded yet proud. The children were not present. Jaime Lannister was nowhere to be seen. He remained in his cell. By the time Pycelle finished his tedious listing of hair color and lineage, "The seed is strong," repeated over and over, Robert could barely contain his fury. He rose from the throne, face ruddy. "That's enough," he barked. "This is conclusive, then." Pycelle bobbed his head, eyes darting nervously between the king and Cersei. "Yes, your grace. I see no plausible explanation for these children's inheritance, aside from the strong possibility that they are not, in fact, born of your seed. The records are quite clear." A ripple of murmurs spread through the handful of lords who had been summoned to witness this. Some turned accusing eyes on Cersei. Others looked merely stunned. The queen remained silent, though she lifted her chin defiantly. Robert's voice dropped to a low rumble. "So that's it then. My marriage is a lie. My heirs, false. I have been made a fool for years. Cersei Lannister, you stand accused of high treason against the crown." He gestured to Ser Barristan, who stepped forward with a stoic expression. "Ser Barristan, see that she is confined once more. We shall hold a trial when the time is right." Cersei's eyes flashed with desperation and anger. "Robert, listen to yourself. You would place your children, and they are your children, no matter what these dusty tomes say, outside your protection. Have you no heart? They are innocent." Robert roared. "Innocent of the lie that spawned them, perhaps. But I will not let them sit the Iron Throne, nor threaten the realm. If Tywin wants them, he'll have to come through me. You," he snarled, turning to the guards, "remove her. She is stripped of her title as queen. I want her in a cell. I want Jaime Lannister's cell moved as well. Keep them separate. I don't want them conspiring." "Doing?" A surge of guards advanced. Cersei's composure finally fractured. She let out a hiss of fury, struggling uselessly. "You are dooming yourself, Robert Baratheon. My father will come, and he will tear your head from your shoulders. You will beg me for forgiveness." Her shouts echoed in the vast space of the throne room as she was dragged away. Robert stood motionless, breathing hard, while Pycelle and the other lords regarded the king with wary eyes. Ned hovered near the base of the throne's dais, heart pounding. This was a more public condemnation than he'd expected, and the consequences would be severe. Renly and Stannis remained aside. Renly showed visible discomfort as Cersei's angry cries drifted away, but Stannis wore a look of harsh satisfaction. He turned to Robert. "Now the realm knows, brother. We must move quickly. Tywin's rage will be unstoppable." Robert gave a curt nod. "Then let him come. Let all of Westeros know my wrath. I'll not be used again." He sank onto the Iron Throne as if its metal claws had seized him. "I fought a war for this seat once, and I'll do it again if I must." Ned felt the eyes of the court upon them. Lords from lesser houses, stewards, knights who had come to witness. The hush was profound, as if even the slightest sound might spark a fresh explosion. At length, Robert waved a hand dismissively. "We're done here. All of you out." The hall cleared, leaving only Ned, Stannis, Renly, Ser Barristan, and a few loyal guards. Robert closed his eyes, shoulders bowed under the weight of a monarchy unraveling. When he opened them, he glanced at Ned, expression raw. "All these years, Ned. All these years. I felt something was amiss, but I was too drunk, too lost in regrets for Lyanna. I didn't want to face the truth. Ned approached the throne, voice quiet. It is no easy truth, my friend. Robert let out a ragged exhale. The children. What do I do about them? Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen. None of them are mine, yet they are still innocent of their parents' treachery. If I keep them close, they are a threat. If I send them away, I risk them becoming rallying points for the Lannisters. Stannis broke in. You have to secure them, Robert. That's the only logical move. They remain wards of the crown, hostages, if you will. If Tywin wants them, he'll have to negotiate, which might buy us time. Manting? Oh, Renly spoke more gently. We could see them fostered out to loyal lords perhaps if we don't want them in King's Landing. But they must be watched. Robert rubbed a hand over his bearded jaw. Foster them out. Like any other rebellious lord's children. Gods, I never thought it would come to this. He nodded stiffly. Very well. Do it. Keep them safe, but keep them under watch. Joffrey is nearly a man grown. The other two younger. They'll understand soon enough. Ned said nothing, though he remembered the fear in Myrcella's eyes. Tommen's trembling lip. They did not deserve to be used as pawns in this deadly game. Yet it was better than the alternative. Tywin rallying half the realm behind the rightful heirs, sparking an even bloodier war. At least as wards, they would live. Robert rose from the throne, descending the steps. He gestured for them all to follow him into a more private space, away from prying ears. Once, they reached a smaller council room. He slumped into a chair, letting out a humorless chuckle. Gods, I wish I'd never come to King's Landing. Sometimes I wish I'd died on the Trident and left all this nonsense to someone else. Renly and Stannis exchanged looks, but said nothing. Ned placed a hand on Robert's shoulder. We'll stand with you, Robert. We've come this far. Robert shook his head. I don't deserve such loyalty, but I'm grateful, Ned. He sighed, massaging his temples. Now we wait for Tywin's response. Meanwhile, the city readies for war. We'll muster the Crownland. Stannis, handle the fleet. Renly, see about the Tyrells. Ned, coordinate with the Tullys. And we keep the Lannisters locked up. May the Seven have mercy on us all. Nasty war. They dispersed again, each weighed with responsibility. The next few days brought a flurry of preparations. Smiths in the city worked day and night forging spears and swords. The cost was enormous, draining the royal treasury further, but Robert insisted every man in King's Landing have a blade if needed. The city gates were tightened and the watch on the walls increased. Rumors spread through the streets like wildfire, rumors that the queen was a traitor and her children bastards. The tension was palpable everywhere. Riots threatened to break out in Flea Bottom, fueled by the fear of war and the scarcity of food. Ned had to send more men to quell the unrest. Amid the chaos, the three royal children were moved into more modest accommodations. More comfortable than cells, but guarded around the clock. Joffrey, outraged, tried to resist, demanding to see his mother. But the gold cloaks held firm. Myrcella wept quietly, and Tommen's face grew pale and drawn with dread. The city thrummed with the knowledge that their once prince and princesses were now wards, their future uncertain. Meanwhile, ravens arrived with replies, some from minor lords pledging their swords to the king, others from the Stormlands reaffirming their loyalty to House Baratheon. But from the west came only silence. Tywin's host was on the march, unstoppable. From the north, Ned received word that Robb Stark was growing into his role as the new warden of the region. But the distance was great, and the immediate conflict was in the south and west. If Tywin pushed further, the north might join the fray. But that would be a long march indeed. On the 5th day after Cersei's public disgrace, as Ned walked the battlements at dawn, he spotted the royal shipyards. Already, the sails of Stannis war galleys lined the harbor, black stags emblazoned on golden banners. The early morning wind carried the tang of salt, and gulls cried overhead, circling the tall masts. He watched as Stannis himself oversaw the loading of supplies, stern-faced as always, his short-clipped hair ruffling in the breeze. Men scurried along the dock, rolling barrels of provisions and stacking them in neat piles. If rumors held true, the Navy would soon sail toward the west. possibly to assault Lannisport, or at least blockade the shipping lanes, cutting the Lannisters off from trade. At the same time, Renly was likely in the Solar, scribbling fresh letters to the Tyrells, or bickering with Pycelle about diplomatic niceties. Robert, wherever he was probably drowning his lingering sorrows in wine. Yet he seemed more sober these past days than Ned had seen him in years, his anger forging a dreadful clarity of purpose. In the city below, bells tolled from the great septe, a soft chime echoing over the rooftops. Ned inhaled the crisp dawn air, glancing toward the horizon. He knew that, somewhere west of those hills, Tywin Lannister's host marched relentlessly, unstoppable as a flood. They would come to the Riverlands soon, if they had not already. Winter was distant, but a storm of steel was upon them. Before he could retreat to his chambers, he heard footsteps. Turning, he saw a man jogging up the steps to the battlements, Jory Castle, breathless, a scroll in hand. "My lord," Jory said, panting. "This just arrived by Raven. It bears the seal of House Tully." Ned took it, swallowing hard. He broke the seal and scanned the lines. His eyes flicked across Catelyn's neat script. She must have been the one to pen it on her father's behalf. "They will stand with us," Ned murmured, relief and tension mingling. "Hoster Tully has mustered his banners and means to block the Lannisters' approach at the Red Fort. Cat says she has also heard rumor that Tywin calls for a truce if we release Cersei and Jaime. But Hoster refuses. He stands with the crown." "Nenem." Jory exhaled, relief plain on his face. "So we have the Riverlands. That's something." "It's more than something," Ned said. "It could be the difference between victory and defeat. The Lannisters will have to fight through Riverrun's men before they can threaten the crown. We must send word to King Robert. Perhaps we can coordinate a pincer. Stannis at sea, Tully on the land, us in the city. If Tywin commits to a full campaign, we might catch him in a vice." Perhaps no. He handed the letter back to Jory, who hurried away to deliver the news. Ned lingered a moment longer, leaning against the parapet, considering the precarious shape of this war. House Tully, House Baratheon, and House Stark, 3 old allies from the rebellion, now braced themselves against the wealth and cunning of House Lannister. And somewhere in the mix was Littlefinger, the master of coin, weaving his own ends. The Tyrells might yet come, tilting the balance in favor of the throne. Or they might remain on the sidelines, waiting to see who looked poised to win. Ned reminded himself that Tywin Lannister, for all his power, was not invincible. He could be outfought, outmaneuvered, if the right alliances aligned. But the cost would be high. The realm would bleed, and already common folk across the Riverlands were facing the brutality of men like Gregor Clegane, the mountain that rides. As the sunrise flared in the sky, Ned felt no solace in its beauty. He recalled Robert's words, "Another war, if that's what it takes." Yet Ned found it hard to rejoice in such a prospect. Honor demanded that they face the Lannisters, who had committed treachery upon the crown, murdered Jon Arryn, and broken the king's marriage. Justice demanded that the children not be used to seize power. But the path ahead was dark. His thoughts drifted to Sansa and Arya again. He had half a mind to send them north immediately, but the roads were hardly safe. Tywin's outriders could be roaming near the Rosewad or the Riverlands. And if the capital fell into chaos, traveling might become more dangerous still. For the moment, they remained in the Red Keep, protected by thick walls and loyal swords. They might be safer here, unless Tywin's host made it to the city. With a final glance at the golden skies, Ned turned from the battlements. He descended the stone steps, heading to seek Robert, to share the news from Riverrun. Each footfall echoed the drumbeat of oncoming strife, the march of thousands of men. The words kept turning in his mind. War is coming. War is coming. He could almost hear the distant thunder of hooves, the clatter of steel. It chilled him to know there was no easy path to peace now. The realm was set on this course, and they would either prevail or perish in the attempt. He forced himself onward, boots scraping the stone. Duty and honor propelled him. The day would bring more decisions, more calls for muster, more urgent letters. Beyond that, the gods alone knew what end awaited them. The best he could do was brace for the storm, and pray that the realm might yet emerge unbroken from the torrent of blood and betrayal. "Oi, honey, how?" Ned moved quickly through the winding corridors of the Red Keep, the scroll from River Run held securely in his hand. Its words still echoed in his mind. House Tully was mustering in support of the crown, prepared to stand between Tywin's hosts and the seat of royal power. Their swords would buy time. Time for Robert, Stannis, and the rest to fortify King's Landing. Time to call upon other possible allies who might yet rally to the stag. He found the king in his private solar, surrounded by maps and half-finished tankards of ale. Robert looked up at the sound of Ned's boots striking the floor. His eyes were bloodshot, as though he had not slept. In a corner, Renly flicked through a pile of parchment with an impatient air, while Stannis paced by the window, the gold light of early morning throwing sharp angles across his austere features. Ned inclined his head to them both before he turned to Robert. "We have new word from Catelyn. She writes on her father's behalf. River Run stands with you." Robert let out a rough sigh, relief tempered by the weight of responsibility. "And so my father by law at last makes a stand." "Good. I'd expect no less from Hoster Tully." "None?" Renly looked up from the parchments. "Any indication of how many men they can muster?" Ned skimmed the letter again. "The Tullys have long held allegiances with many Riverland houses. Sir Edmure, Catelyn's brother, sent riders to secure those vows. The letter mentions upward of 10,000 men, possibly more if all the minor lords respond favorably." "Possibly more if all the minor lords respond favorably." Renly blew out a short breath. "That could match a considerable portion of Tywin's might. If the Tully forces can block or delay him, we could position our own armies advantageously. The question is whether Tywin will attempt to flank them, or whether the Riverlords will hold their ground." "Nah." Stannis paused in his pacing to speak. "Either way, Tywin's progress is halted. He cannot simply march east and ignore the Tullys at his rear. The next move is his." He turned those penetrating eyes on Robert. "We should reinforce the Tullys if we can. The city is well defended now. Banners from the Crown Lands continue to arrive, and we have a decent number of gold cloaks. You might dispatch a force under a trusted commander to aid Hoster Tully." "More indeed." Robert gave the idea some thought, rubbing a hand over his dark beard. "I'll not out in person yet. The king must remain here, so Tywin cannot attempt a lightning strike at the capital. But a loyal force to assist the Tullys might tip the balance. Perhaps you could lead them, Stannis, if your fleet can spare you." Stannis' face tightened. "I intended to sail west, to threaten Lannisport and distract Tywin's supply lines." Ned set the scroll on the table. "We can't be everywhere at once. Another option is to send one of your storm lords, Robert. Someone with proven loyalty and capable of commanding a sizable host. Perhaps Lord Bryce Caron or Lord Selwyn Tarth, if they've arrived with men." "Ben?" Robert nodded thoughtfully. "I'll consider it. For now, though, the Tullys will have to hold. My fleet is essential to keep Tywin from bringing in hired swords or supplies by sea. We'll see how the lines shape up in the coming weeks. If it appears the Tullys are outmatched, we'll reinforce them. In the meantime, every day that passes gives us more time to prepare. I don't like hiding behind walls, but this is the game we must play." "Sir." Renly turned to Ned. "If we have the Tullys, do we have any chance of the Arryns as well? You mentioned Lysa. Arryn is at the Eyrie. If she were to bring the Knights of the Vale, that would be a powerful force." Ned hesitated. His sister-in-law was unpredictable, fiercely protective of her young son. "I've sent letters. So far, there's been no definitive answer. She has not forgiven court politics for Jon Arryn's death, and she may fear for young Robert Arryn's safety if they join a war. Still, if the Vale could be swayed, Tywin would face an even greater challenge. I'll press again, but I can't promise anything." Robert let out a hollow laugh. "It always comes down to alliances. I was happier fighting the Mad King on the battlefield than wrangling noble houses and begging their support." He set a fist on the table, making the empty cups jostle. "So be it. We stand firm. Let Tywin come. They continued discussing logistics, the low hum of tension lacing every word. After an hour, they disbanded. Renly left to pen more letters, hoping to charm the Tyrells with the promise of more influence in King's Landing. Stannis returned to the harbor to inspect the final outfitting of war galleys. Robert said he wished to speak with Ned privately, and the two old friends lingered in the solar, the light shifting to an amber hue as the sun climbed. Robert sank heavily onto a bench, gesturing for Ned to do the same. 7 hells, Ned. Sometimes I wish we could trade places. You were always better at thinking before you acted. I was always the brute who smashed problems with a war hammer. Now everything is so tangled. Then Ned sat beside him. You're still the king, Robert, and these lords will follow you out of respect or fear, or both. Stannis is right, we must stay vigilant. But we have the advantage of numbers if the Tyrells join, and possibly the Vale. The Lannisters may be wealthy, but gold won't win them the throne if half the realm stands against them. Robert inhaled slowly, as though some deep ache gnawed at him. That's not what worries me most. You've seen Joffrey, locked up in those chambers, surrounded by guards. He hates me now. I can see it in his eyes. The boy I thought was my son. He trailed off, a flicker of pain crossing his features. He's still a child, but a vicious one. I wonder what he might do, or what Cersei might have taught him all these years. Ned studied Robert's face. He won't be a threat as long as he's under watch. And if we ever see peace again, you can decide what to do with him and his siblings. Robert pressed his lips together, gripping Ned's shoulder. We must see the war through first, I know. Still, it sits heavy on me. If I lose, Tywin will come for our heads. If I win, I might have to put those children to the sword. You see the problem, Ned? Sometimes victory demands a price I'm not sure I want to pay. But I have no choice. Ned thought of Sansa and Arya. How he would feel if either child were locked away as a pawn in this game. We'll find another way, he said softly. I cannot believe the realm must always choose bloodshed as the answer. Robert let out a long breath. You're a good man. That's why I wanted you by my side. Right now, though, I feel like I'm drowning in decisions. He rapped his knuckles on the table and mustered a grim half-smile. Go on, Ned. Tend to whatever tasks you have. I'll see you at council later. Maybe I'll be in a mood to drink tonight. Ned stood and gave the king a respectful bow, departing the solar. In the corridor, a hush hung in the air. The Red Keep thrummed with suppressed energy. Each corridor lined with armed guards. Servants rushed about with lowered eyes, determined not to draw attention to themselves. Ned made his way toward the Tower of the Hand, where he had a modest cluster of rooms. He paused at a window slit, looking out over the city. From that vantage, he could see the winding streets and the muddy rooftops, the throng of small folk living in precarious times. War was afoot, and if the coming battles went poorly, these same small folk might riot, starve, or flee. The burdens of power weighed doubly when he imagined the cost in ordinary lives. At length he ascended the winding stair to his chambers. Jory Castle and 2 Stark men stood guard outside the door. Jory nodded in greeting, stepping aside to let Ned enter. Within, Sansa and Arya were practicing needlework under Septa Mordane's supervision. Or at least Sansa was. Arya, perched on a stool by the window, fiddled absently with a scrap of cloth, as though she'd rather fling it from the ramparts. When she noticed Ned, her face brightened. Father, Arya said, immediately setting aside the cloth and jumping to her feet. Sansa followed with a more polite nod. The Septa dipped her head, giving Ned a quiet courtesy. He smiled gently, though concern nagged at him. How fare my girls? Sansa managed a small, strained smile. We're well enough, Father, just anxious. The city feels different. Arya's mouth pressed into a line. We saw soldiers in the yard from the Stormlands. They were training in the mud. Their captain said the Lannisters are traitors. Is that true? Ned glanced at Septa Mordane, who looked flustered, then at his daughters. We've discussed that times are dangerous. Treachery comes in many forms, but it's not for you to worry. You must remain vigilant and safe, as I've told you before. I may have to leave the city if the king commands me to, and if that happens, I'll arrange an escort for both of you to travel north or stay under guard in the Red Keep. Nothing is certain yet. Menalon. Sansa's eyes widened. You might leave, but I don't want to remain here without you. Can we go to Winterfell with you? Ned set a hand on her shoulder. It may not come to that. But if it does, I'll do what I can to keep you safe. That's all I can promise. Arya frowned as though ready to protest, but she saw the weariness in Ned's face and held her tongue. The septa cleared her throat and led the girls from the room, murmuring something about continuing their lessons elsewhere, so that Lord Stark might have quiet. Ned was grateful for the moment alone. He settled at a small desk, rummaging through scattered correspondence. Another letter from Catelyn demanded his attention, bearing the seal of House Tully. Opening it, he discovered an update on the gathering of Riverland forces. Cat mentioned the tension at Riverrun. Edmure was marshalling men day and night, sending out scouts to watch for Lannister outriders. The letter also confirmed that Tyrion Lannister remained in the Eyrie, awaiting some form of trial by Lysa Arryn's decree. How that drama might unfold, Ned could not say. But it was yet another spark that could inflame Tywin's fury further. As he set the letter aside, a servant entered quietly, delivering a message from Grand Maester Pycelle. The king desired Ned's presence in the throne room. Ned rubbed his temples, exhausted, yet he rose and made his way there. In the corridors, he caught glimpses of hush-faced courtiers drifting along the walls, rumors dancing in every whispered conversation. Rumors of a new pronouncement, of possible hostages, of Lannister riders seen near the Rose Road. The air was thick with speculation. The throne room was not crowded today. Robert had cleared away the usual courtiers, preferring smaller gatherings. On the dais of the Iron Throne stood the king, flanked by Renly and Sir Barristan Selmy. Stannis stood a step below, arms folded. Pycelle lurked near a lectern, rummaging through parchments. A handful of watchers lined the walls, including Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen, guarded by a ring of gold cloaks who kept them away from prying eyes. Ned caught a flash of bitterness on Joffrey's face, but the boy said nothing. At the foot of the throne, looking meek and discomfited, was Balon Swan, a knight of Lesser standing within the king's guard. He was newly sworn and carried himself with a mixture of pride and nervousness. Seemingly, he had news to deliver, as Pycelle had him reading from a rolled parchment. The moment Ned approached, Robert waved him closer so he could hear. Balon Swan cleared his throat, looking from Robert to the gathered lords. Your Grace, we received word from the Gold Road. Tywin Lannister's outriders have clashed with House Tully scouts near the border of the Riverlands. The Tullys withdrew after a skirmish. Casualties were light on both sides, but it confirms the Lannisters moved steadily east. Robert's jaw tightened. Just a skirmish, then. They're testing the boundaries. He turned to Ned. It's begun. Pycelle nodded, though the motion was slow and uncertain. Indeed, Your Grace. The Tully outriders retreated to gather reinforcements. Lord Tywin presumably continues his march. He shows no sign of halting. Main to howl. Robert exhaled sharply, his voice rolling through the hall. Then I send this warning to Tywin Lannister. If he crosses the Red Fork with an army at his back, we shall consider it a declaration of open war. Summon the ravens, Pycelle. Let the realm know that the crown will treat any Lannister incursion as treason. Stannis inclined his head. In effect, it is a declaration of war on our part. A line has been drawn. Renly's expression was grim. Better to have clarity than to let them creep closer. Robert motioned for Balon Swan to rise. Thank you, Sir Balon. You're dismissed. As the knight retreated, Robert looked around at those gathered. His gaze snagged on Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen. Why did you bring them here? A soldier stepped forward uncertainly. We thought, with such official pronouncements, it might be prudent for them to witness the king's justice. Robert scowled. The children are not needed here. Take them back to their chambers. The guard bowed, ushering the three youngsters out. Joffrey cast a furious look over his shoulder, but Myrcella and Tommen moved quietly, their heads bowed. Ned felt a pang of sympathy, though he masked it. Even if they were bastards, The children were caught in a world too dangerous for them to grasp. When they were gone, Robert sagged back against the Iron Throne's spiked metal. So this is how it goes, a dance around the Riverlands until Tywin commits. Meanwhile, half the realm waits to see what House Tyrell does. Lovely. His blue eyes flicked to Renly. Any word from Highgarden? Renly frowned. None yet. I've sent multiple letters, each more generous than the last. Lord Mace Tyrell is likely weighing how to extract the greatest concessions. I've implied the king might favor a future match between the Tyrell line and a Baratheon, or even a Stark if that would help. But there's no guarantee. Dane. Robert's laughter was bitter. A pity. If they sit on the fence too long, we'll fight this war without them. And if we win, they'll find we have fewer favors to give. He rapped his knuckles on the throne's arm. Enough. We've done all we can by letter. We'll prepare for open conflict. Nah. Stannis took a step forward, face set in his usual iron composure. Let me sail within the week then, brother. My fleet will circle west, harass their coast, perhaps block Lannisport, cut off trade. By land, they'll have to deal with Tully forces. By sea, they'll have me. If we're fortunate, they'll hesitate to push further inland, giving us time to rally more sword. Robert nodded. Do it. As for the city, we'll hold. Ned, keep the gold cloaks on high alert. I'll call more of my vassals to gather within King's Landing or nearby. If it comes to a siege, I want the city well stocked. Denjagawar. Ned bowed slightly. It will be done, Your Grace. Robert stood, the metal edges of the throne catching the torchlight like flickers of flame. The realm will know. The king will not yield. Tywin Lannister sets foot on the Red Fork, and war is official. He paused, eyes scanning the chamber. I suppose there's no turning back now. No one challenged that somber statement. They departed, each to their tasks. Ned found himself walking the torchlit corridors, the gloom of the Red Keep pressing in more than ever. Memories of Robert's rebellion filled his mind. He had been a younger man then, driven by righteous fury against the Mad King. Now, the foe was no mad Targaryen, but the cunning Lannisters, a family with deep pockets and many potential allies. The war ahead threatened to be equally bloody and perhaps more complex, for the realm was not unified behind Robert as it once had been. Many had grown weary of his rule, or grown dependent on Lannister gold. Still, Ned forced himself to maintain a steady facade of confidence. He had men depending on him. His own retainers from the north, the guards entrusted with the city's security, even Robert himself. As Hand of the King, Ned Stark was the fulcrum upon which a great deal of responsibility teetered. He would not fail, no matter the burden. The days that followed blended into a blur of preparations. Ships filled the harbor, bristling with armed men. Ballistae and supplies for Stannis' planned voyage. Merchants in the streets hoarded their wares, driving up prices until the small folk grumbled in discontent. Riots threatened to break out near the fish market, forcing Ned to send the gold cloaks to restore order. The master of coin, Petyr Baelish, reappeared fleetingly, only to vanish again, citing urgent business outside the city. Ned suspected Littlefinger was hedging his bets, possibly ensuring personal profit from the chaos. All the while ravens came and went. One arrived from the Vale, containing a polite but non-committal reply from Lysa Arryn. She claimed the Vale could not risk open warfare while her son was so young, but she offered half-hearted moral support. Another raven, from Riverrun, indicated the Tully scouts had spotted large columns of Lannister soldiers, perhaps double the original estimate. The weight of those tidings hung heavily in every council meeting. Some small measure of solace came when a party of lords from the Crownlands rode in, pledging a few thousand additional swords to the king's cause. On the 6th day after Tywin's outriders clashed with Tully scouts, King's Landing stirred at the pre-dawn hour. Ned rose from his bed, rubbing the grit of poor sleep from his eyes, and donned his clothes by candlelight. He kept his sword belt close, mindful that even within these walls, treachery could strike. The city was quieter than usual, the air damp and cold, as though it anticipated the departure of Stannis Baratheon's fleet. By the time Ned reached the yard, he found Stannis already astride a tall courser, flanked by a retinue of stern-faced knights. The faint glow of torches, gave their breastplates a dull gleam. Robert stood by, arms folded, scowling at his brother, though it seemed more an expression of suppressed anxiety than anger. Renly hovered close, exchanging final words with Stannis. Ned joined them as Stannis swung down from his horse, stepping forward to speak quietly with Robert. The two brothers, never close, had come together in common purpose for once. Robert gripped Stannis' arm firmly. "Return triumphant," Robert said in a low voice. "Strike fear into the Lannisters' hearts. Once Tywin hears you threaten Lannisport, maybe he'll reconsider his push east." Stannis' features remained flinty. "I'll do what must be done, brother. No more, no less. The realm can't afford half measures." Robert gave a tight nod. "Agreed. Go with the blessings of the Seven, or whichever gods see fit to watch over us." "Neburanciao." A rare flicker of emotion ghosted across Stannis' stern face. Then he turned, mounted his horse once more, and raised a hand in silent farewell. His knights closed around him, and they rode out the castle gates toward the harbor where the Baratheon warships waited. Ned watched them go, a quiet sense of foreboding rising in his chest. If Stannis' gamble succeeded, it could buy precious time for the Tullys, and for King's Landing. If it failed, the Lannisters might find themselves free to concentrate their efforts on the Riverlands, and eventually the city itself. Renly exhaled, turning to Robert. "We'll miss his steel here, but we can't fight them on even terms. A two-front approach is best." Robert frowned. "Yes, I just wish." His thought went unfinished as hooves clattered across the courtyard. A breathless messenger reined in sharply, nearly tumbling from the saddle. He was one of the king's outriders, bearing the crowned stag badge on his cloak. Sweat-drenched hair clung to his forehead. "Your Grace," the messenger gasped, bowing from the saddle. "We have news. The Lannisters march in full force. Lord Tywin leads the vanguard. Our scouts say they'll be at the Red Fork within 2 days. House Tully has fortified positions along the fords. They mean to stand." Robert's mouth twisted. "They stand. Then the war begins in earnest." He gestured for the messenger to continue. The man gulped, trying to catch his breath. "Sir Adam Marbrand's outriders harassed some Tully supply lines last night. They were driven back, but it's clear the Lannisters are prodding for weak points. If Lord Edmure Tully cannot hold, they'll either retreat to River Run or risk being flanked. They want reinforcements. Soon." "Bender," Renly cursed softly. "We need time for Stannis' plan to work. If Tywin attacks now in full strength, the Tullys might be overwhelmed before the threat to his rear even matters." Robert's eyes flicked to Ned, a question unspoken. "We can't leave them to their fate," the king said, voice low. "If Tywin crushes the Tullys, we lose the Riverlands. He'd be at our doorstep before Stannis can land a single man near Lannisport." Ned nodded, mind racing. "We either send aid now, or we risk losing them entirely. But to dispatch a significant force out of King's Landing leaves the city vulnerable. You know that, Robert. If we leave with half our armies, who remains behind to guard the Red Keep?" Robert's face was grim. "It's a risk. Yet if Tywin crosses the river unopposed, the city's walls may not save us in the end. A besieged King's Landing, cut off from supply lines, is no safer than a forward camp in the field." Renly turned back to the messenger. "Did Lord Edmure Tully specifically request the king's presence in battle, or only more men?" The messenger bowed his head. "He wrote that any aid, be it the king himself or a royal commander, would bolster their morale. They're prepared to fight, but they fear being outnumbered." Robert stilled, glancing around at the assembled knights. A hush fell, so complete that the distant sound of gulls from the harbor drifted over the walls. Then the king straightened, an echo of his old warrior self. "I'll go," Robert said softly, conviction in his voice. "I've been caged in this cursed city long enough. If we're to bring this war to Tywin, I'll lead the van myself. I'll rally the men. We'll meet the Tullys near the fords, if they can hold. We'll break Tywin's lines or die trying." Ned's heart lurched. Memories of the rebellion flickered in his mind. Robert unstoppable on the battlefield, warhammer in hand, roaring defiance at Rhaegar's knights. Yet, This was not the same Robert as before. He was heavier, older, weighed down by years of idle living and the burdens of kingship. Could he still fight as he once did? Renly hesitated, voice gentle. "Is that wise, brother?" "The city." Robert swung a piercing gaze on him. "The city can hold under Ned's command, or we split it differently. But I won't let Tywin do as he pleases while I hide behind these walls." He looked at Ned. "What say you, old friend? Will you come with me or stay to hold the capital? I'd prefer you by my side as always, but I can't leave the Red Keep undefended." Ned stepped forward, torn by the choice. If he left the city with Robert, who would protect Sansa and Arya? Who would oversee the gold cloaks and ensure order in the king's absence? But if he stayed behind, Robert might march into battle without the counsel that had guided him for years. The realm's fate hinged on these decisions. "I'll remain here," Ned said softly, though it pained him. "The city needs the hand's presence, especially if Tywin attempts any trickery or infiltration. Take men you trust, your best knights, and show the Lannisters that the king still wields a warhammer with a mighty hand. I'll safeguard King's Landing and prepare for the worst if your campaign stalls." "Navzor." Robert studied him, then gave a slow nod. "So be it. I can't deny the city needs you, and my men are desperate for a rallying figure. They'll fight harder if they know I'm in command. I'll gather our forces at the Dragon Gate on the morrow. We leave at first light." Renly glanced between them, jaw clenched in worry. "I'll stay in the city as well then. If something should happen to you, brother, the realm needs a Baratheon presence here. Though the men might wish to see me in the field, I think it best I coordinate the political side. Continue to press the Tyrells. We can't all go herring off to war." "Namdi." Robert nodded. "Agreed. See it done. And if you hear word of Stannis' success on the western coast, let me know at once." He paused, gesturing for the messenger to approach again. "Go back to the fords. Tell Lord Edmure Tully that King Robert rides to join him. Let him hold as best he can until we arrive." The messenger bowed low. "At once, your grace." He turned and urged his horse out of the courtyard. The clatter of hooves lingered in the crisp morning air. Ned watched as Robert squared his shoulders, an energy about him that had been absent these many years. There was something both thrilling and terrifying in seeing Robert like this, reborn in old armor, determined to prove he was still the man who struck down Prince Rhaegar. Yet Rhaegar had died long ago, and Robert was no longer young. Tywin's cunning overshadowed any single champion's prowess, however mighty the hammer. That night, the castle bustled in feverish preparation. Torches blazed along the walls, the glow casting dancing shadows across the yard. Smiths worked furiously to shoe horses, sharpen swords, repair old helms. Soldiers from the Crown Lands arrived in small companies, eager to march under the king's banner. The muster grew by the hour, tents springing up in the outer wards for those who could not be housed within the keep. Ned supervised the arrangements, ensuring supply wagons were loaded, horses accounted for, rations assigned. He felt each step deepen his sense of dread. Dawn would bring the king's departure. If all went according to plan, Robert would link with the Tullys within a fortnight and contest Tywin's passage across the Red Fork. But if the Lannisters moved faster or inflicted a crushing defeat, Robert might be cut off, forced to retreat or risk annihilation. Later, after midnight, Ned climbed the steps to the battlements, looking down at the flicker of hundreds of campfires in the fields beyond the city gates. He could see the distant glow from windows across King's Landing, hear the far-off hum of voices that never fully quieted. The night sky overhead was clear, stars cold and indifferent to human strife. He sensed a presence behind him, and turned to see Sir Barristan Selmy approaching with measured steps. The old knight inclined his head politely. "Lord Stark, you're up late." Ned nodded, resting forearms on the stone parapet. "There's much on my mind, Sir Barristan." "I imagine you're here for the same reason." The Kingsguard sighed, glancing at the campfires. "I'm to ride with the king on the morrow. We'll have a large retinue, but the times weigh heavily. His grace was once the finest warrior in Westeros, but he's not the man he was. I fear for him." Ned felt a pang of sympathy, He's still formidable, but Tywin will not meet him in a fair fight if he can help it. He'll scheme and maneuver. Barristan stared out into the night, lines of care etched on his weathered face. A part of me yearns to test my skill again. The King's Guard is an honor, but the city walls are stifling. Still, I worry it may not be a fair match. I remember the aftermath of the Trident. Robert was unstoppable then. Now, well, see. Ned lowered his voice. Be watchful, Sir Barristan. If the tide turns badly, protect him. He trusts you. I do too. Barristan pressed a hand to his breast, the white cloak shifting. You have my word, Lord Stark. I will not fail him. He hesitated, then added, and watch your own back here. The Lannisters have eyes everywhere. With that, he bowed and made his way along the battlements. Ned stayed a while longer, the breeze tugging at his cloak, the smell of burning torches filling the air. He closed his eyes briefly, envisioning the fords at the Red Fork, the dusty roads where thousands of men would clash. He pictured Tywin Lannister's stern face, cold and unyielding. Somewhere in that swirl of possibility, the realm's fate was being decided. Eventually, he descended to his chambers, where he found his daughters asleep, the Septa dozing in a chair outside their door. He quietly slipped inside, gazing at their sleeping forms. Sansa's hair spread on her pillow, Arya curled in a half-tangled blanket as though she'd had a restless dream. They both seemed so small in that moment. He prayed to the old gods that they would remain safe, that the king's gambit would end swiftly. War was a poison that seeped into every corner of the realm, but perhaps, if the gods were merciful, it could be short-lived. Sleep claimed him in fitful snatches, broken by dark visions of ravens circling battlefields, and the clang of steel on steel. When dawn came at last, he dressed quickly and hurried to the yard, heart pounding as though he were the one departing for war. The sky was gray, clouds drifting overhead, a slight chill in the early air. Soldiers bustled about, armoring themselves, loading last-minute barrels of provisions. Horses stamped and whickered, nervous but disciplined under the hands of squires. Robert stood astride his war horse in the center of the yard, wearing blackened steel armor chased with gold, the crowned stag sigil prominent on his breastplate. He held his warhammer across his lap, the familiar weapon from old campaigns. The king's face was set in grim determination, and yet a spark of excitement lit his eyes, as if some old dormant flame had roared back to life. A crowd of onlookers had gathered, lesser lords and knights who would remain behind, the small folk who served in the keep, even a handful of noble ladies braving the chill to see the king off. Renly stood near the gates, cloaked in green velvet, offering final salutes to the knights who passed. Sir Barristan was mounted beside Robert, white cloak draped over polished armor, his expression solemn. A retinue of Kingsguard and other loyal knights formed up in neat rows. Ned approached. Robert caught sight of him and beckoned. Ned, if the gods are good, I'll see you soon with Tywin's head on a spike. If they're not, he paused, shaking away at the dark possibility. You rule in my stead if something happens. We can't leave chaos to devour the city. I'll do my duty, Ned said softly. May the old gods watch over you, Robert. The king leaned down and gripped Ned's forearm in a warrior's farewell. I'll bring you back a Lannister banner, old friend. Then he straightened, bellowing at the assembled host. Form ranks, we ride. Hooves thundered on the cobblestones, and the gates creaked open. Robert Baratheon led his men out of the Red Keep, a tide of steel and banners flowing behind him. The crowned stag flags rippled in the breeze, as though alive, the morning light glinting off helmets and pikes. The onlookers watched, some cheering, some silent with dread. Ned stood near the gates, heart heavy, recalling how this same man had once charged into battle all those years ago. History repeated itself now in a new shape, with new dangers. As the king's host vanished into the streets, heading toward the city gates that led west, Ned felt an odd hollowness. He was left to hold King's Landing, to keep order while the realm descended into open war. The day had begun, the city stirring with uncertain energy. Ned turned on his heel, beckoning Jory Castle to his side. Their responsibilities pressed in. The gold cloaks, the supplies, the watchfulness for sabotage or infiltration. Yet, as he stepped away from the gate, the echo of horses lingered in his ears, and with it, a silent question. Would Robert return triumphant, as he had once done, or would this war break the very spirit that had fueled him in youth? Ned knew no answer. All he could do was fulfill his role, be the hand of the king, guard the capital and protect his daughters, and pray that justice might yet prevail against the storm of Lannister power crashing upon the land. The hours ahead would stretch into days and weeks, each moment brimming with peril. The realm's fate now galloped west with Robert toward the waiting fires of war.